Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
We had Steve Witkoff disappearing from the scene. He came back. And again, he tried to talk with Iranians, tried to contact Iranians. He's in Moscow and talking. He left, but he had a meeting with Vladimir Putin. So far, we don't know what was the outcome of that. But when it comes to Donald Trump and his strategy, and the way that he's talking about the war in Ukraine, it doesn't seem that he knows that much about what's going on. And here is what he said just yesterday.
President Zelensky just signed a law allowing for citizens age 60 and above to serve in the military. We've seen dozens of videos of young men being hauled into vans and dragged to the front lines against their will. And we've even seen videos of a young man with Down syndromes serving on the front line. When you campaigned, you said you wanted to see the people stop dying. A lot of people admired that statement. Now the people dying are elderly, mentally handicapped, and conscripts. So even if a ceasefire doesn't work out, why should Americans continue to fund a foreign military that's scraping the bottom of the barrel of its population like this?
Well, you have to understand very importantly, this is Biden's war. This is not my war. I'm here to get us out of it. It's a mess, and I'm here to get us out. I haven't heard that when you say about 60-year-old men and, et cetera. But this is Biden's war, and we're working very hard to get us out.
It's more than 8 months that we're talking about the people that Zelensky is trying to send to the battlefield, young people and elderly people and more than 60 years old. And Donald Trump says he doesn't know and he has no clue about it. How can we assume that he knows what's going on with the case of Ukraine?
I think we can assume that he knows nothing about what's going on in the case of Ukraine. Just the other day, he gave voice to just outlandish, assessments that the Russians suffered 20,000 dead in a month. This last month, the Ukraine's only suffered 8,000 dead since January. I mean, if those are figures that he's quoting as the president of the United States, then, either he is completely failing to comprehend what people are telling him, or people are just spoon feeding him garbage. And those numbers are Ukrainian numbers. This is the fantasy world that Ukrainian extremists who populate social media live in. And this means that the president is dealing with people who scrape social media accounts to pull together, fantasy numbers and then brief the president of the United States. This is disturbing. You've spoken to Ray McGovern on several occasions. He used to be the man who briefed it was the CIA briefer for the presidential daily brief. I was never a briefer. I know that I have been the subject of several presidential daily briefings, and I know what goes into it. The level of scrutiny that information gets before it's included in something that's briefed before the president of the United States, considered to be the most powerful person in the world, who should only have access to the most accurate, verified, fact-based information, carefully assessed information in the world, was amazing. I mean, the CIA bent over backwards to make sure that if it got into the PDB, it was good, because you don't get second chances at that level. This is the president of the United States. This president's being fed garbage. I mean, there's no, PDB. That even when they talk about the PDB, they've turned it into something like a Fox News format. I mean, so it's not, originally it's about entertaining the president. This is crap. I know Tulsi Gabbard, she's responsible for the PDB. She has a huge responsibility and overwhelming tasks. This president doesn't want to be briefed. How can you be briefed if you believe you know everything? I mean, this is a man who, I'm the smartest in the world about this. I know more about this than anybody. He knows nothing about anything, and he just proved it. I mean, this is the president of the United States committing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of American taxpayer money to continue to sustain a conflict that's already been lost. Pretending that he cares about human lives, but all he's doing is guaranteeing that tens of thousands of Ukrainians are going to die. in a war that could be stopped right now if the president made it stop. I hope that's the message that Steve Witkoff got from Vladimir Putin, is that this war can be stopped right now. If you really care about human life, we can stop this war. Vladimir Putin made a presentation. He said, look, Ukraine, just withdraw from our territory, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, and you'll never be part of NATO. If you say that, we'll do a ceasefire right now. Right now, we'll have a ceasefire. And then we'll talk. It's not going to be over at that point in time. It's just a ceasefire. But then they begin conflict termination discussions without anybody dying. That's what the president of the United States claims he wants. Hopefully, Putin turned to Witkoff and said, let me make it as clear as possible. We're advancing, and we will continue to advance until we've taken back all our territory. That's not Ukrainian territory. Sorry, it never will be again. It's Mother Russia. And this is the trajectory we're on. This will happen. It's inevitable. You can't stop it. Now, if you can make the Ukrainians understand that this is going to happen, that you can't stop it, and the only thing that's going to happen is that Ukraine's going to lose another couple 100,000 dead, maybe the best thing to do is just get them the hell out of there, and tell them that they'll never be part of NATO, and then we begin talking at that point in time. And at that point in time, nobody's dying. The president's achieved what he claims to achieve. I hope that's what Putin told Witkoff, and I hope Witkoff comes back and tells Trump exactly that. And I hope that Trump never listens to Steve Kellogg again, because I think that's where a lot of these fanciful numbers are coming from. And I hope that Pete Hegseth takes a lead from Trump and tells people like Christopher Donahue to shut up about Kaliningrad, and maybe start telling Whitaker, the ambassador to NATO, to tone it down. If you ever call Putin, I forget what he called you, just insulting words. If you ever do that again while I'm trying to have a negotiation to bring it into a conflict, I'll fire you, arrest you, and put you in jail for the rest of your life. I mean, what kind of idiot does it take? This man's a former prosecutor. He's supposed to have a couple brain cells up there. What kind of idiot goes out there and badmouths President Putin at the very moment when the United States needs to encourage dialogue with President Putin? The president has surrounded himself with the worst advisors possible. Marco Rubio is horrible. Pete Hegseth is just ignorant as the day is long. There is no national security advisor anymore. Marco Rubio is dual hatting on this. Keith Kellogg is just in, Banderas la la land. The only trusted person that he has out there is Steve Witkoff. And Witkoff's job isn't to actually negotiate. His job is to be a messenger, to take President Trump's message, deliver it, and receive the message from Putin. I trust Witkoff in this capacity, and we'll see. But, we also have to remember that, Witkoff was the guy that was supposedly negotiating with the Iranians at the last minute before Israel carried out their surprise attack. So that's another problem the Russians have is, and I would have said that again, this is why I'll never be the president of anything, but I would have told Witkoff, you're here. But how do I know that, if Trump just moved 2 Ohio-class submarines closer to Russian shores? How do I know you're not here just to, soften us up for the surprise attack? We can't trust you anymore. We don't trust you. We don't believe a word you say anymore. Are you sincere? I don't know. Maybe you're sincere, but is your president sincere? These are things that have to be brought back to President Trump, and he has to be told, you have to change the way you do business, because right now the way you do business is disgraceful. It discredits the United States, and it puts us in a position where when we need diplomacy the most, we can't do it, because who's going to trust us? Nobody should ever trust us again. Not him, not this president.
It's not just about submarines. He deployed nukes to Europe, to the United Kingdom, if
I'm not worried about that. It is what it is, but we already have more than 100 of those bombs there. So what's 20 more? Who cares? It's just the stupidity of it. It's just dumb. But having a couple more B-61-12s stationed in England as opposed to stationed in the Netherlands, stationed in Italy, stationed in Belgium, stationed in Turkey, they're there already. Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over that. What I lose sleep over is the movement of the Ohio-class submarines. That's problematic. What I lose sleep over is the continued desire on the part of the United States to deploy Dark Eagle to Europe. That's a hypersonic missile. I'm not happy about that. I lose sleep over the fact that the Russians have walked away from the INF self-imposed moratorium on deploying INF systems, and now the Oreshnik is in serial production and being deployed. I don't think you're old enough to remember the SS-20 crisis of the 1970s when the Soviets brought the SS-20 out. It changed everything. NATO went from saying, maybe we can do it, to saying, we're dead. The moment this happens, we all die because of this system that just overwhelms everything. And it led to a crisis where we deployed Pershing IIs and ground-launched cruise missiles to Europe and put us on the cusp of of the situation spinning out of control, killing everybody, which is why we signed the INF treaty. Well, we're in a similar situation today because now the Oreshnik is there, and that genie's not going back in the bottle. And now we're going to deploy Dark Eagle, and we're right back to where we were in 1985, 1986. Then we had Pershing IIs ready to strike Moscow in 7 to 12 minutes of launch. The Soviets had the SS-20s. We're going to blanket all of Europe, kill everything. Today, in a year, we're going to have the Dark Eagle that, again, can hit Moscow within minutes of launch. And the Russians have Oreshnik, which can take out everything in Europe. Wow. You think we would have learned, but we didn't. So those are the things that get me. The fact that Donald Trump, like the idiot he is, went ahead and threw a couple more B-6112s into England. It's not a game changer. It doesn't alter the balance of power. Oreshnik alters the balance of power in a big way. And now we don't have a treaty vehicle to limit it. And, the New START treaty expires on February 4th of next year. And when that's gone, we don't have a treaty vehicle to limit it. We'll jump from 1,550 deployed warheads to over 4,000 to 5,000 almost overnight. The United States already has the plan. We've bragged about it. This shows how we negotiate in bad faith with the New START. We put all these warheads into storage by basically dropping the Minuteman III from 3 warheads to 1 warhead. But just months ago, they did a Minuteman test where they put 3 warheads back on a Minuteman and test launched it to prove that they can do it. So overnight, the Minuteman will go from 1 to 3 warheads. 450 of them. There's 900 more warheads out there. The Trident will go from whatever their classified low number is to whatever their classified high number is overnight. Boom. And now we're talking a couple thousand more. We'll go to 4,000 or 5,000 warheads, and then we'll just start building new systems and without any constraints. The next thing you know, we'll be up to 20 to 30,000 warheads deployed, and the Russians will do the same. We're right back to the height of the Cold War. We're reversing everything. So these are the things that bother me. A couple more B-61s. I mean, it shouldn't have happened. I agree with you. It shouldn't have happened. It was stupid, but that's not what I lose sleep over at night about.
But after all, it's a sign to Russians. And today, as Witkoff was talking with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump signed secondary tariffs on India because of Russian oil. These are signs for Russia and the Russian government. If you're honest, if you want something substantial, if you want, as Witkoff was talking about, strategic partnership or cooperation, whatever they're looking for, these are not the signs that make you hopeful about that.
No, but this is Donald Trump we're talking about. All right. He can put them on, he can take them off. I mean, there's no, this isn't Congress passing legislation. Congress already passed legislation that gave the president the ability to do whatever the hell he wants to do. And so the president now can put these on, he can take them off anytime he wants for whatever reason he wants. I think what, in the president's warped little, art of the deal mind, I'm putting them on India to put pressure on Russia, to let the Russians know we're serious. India's already said, pound sand, we're not doing this. China's already said the same thing. Brazil, I think, has said the same thing. I think the president's waking up to the fact that nobody's going to respond to this. Nobody cares. But in his mind, he has to put pressure on, or else, Witkoff won't have any leverage when he meets with Putin. So this is what the president's doing. but this is fake. It's all fake. I feel that, if there's going to be a deal, you're going to see the president, once there's a path to a ceasefire, then the president will, do what needs to be done with, the sanctions he's put on the nations that purchase Russian oil, because you can't have a deal unless you're willing to lift all sanctions, the Russian prerequisites. Got to lift all sanctions, and those include secondary sanctions.
Isn't that amazing that we are living in the Western Hemisphere and we are talking every day? We read the mainstream media and all these discussions on the conflict in Ukraine, but we don't know what's going on in the mind of the Trump administration. You said that somehow we know what Russia wants with a settlement in Ukraine. There's so
It's not somehow we know because Putin tells us, because he's honest with us. Yeah. And as former senior level officials at I think the World Bank said, when we sit down with Vladimir Putin for meetings, he knows everything. He's very well prepared. You can't get him on anything. He knows it all. And he doesn't need notes. He's done his research. This is who we're dealing with here. I mean, literally, I know all the Americans in the audience are going to get really mad at me for saying this. He's the best leader in the world today. There's no leader that comes close to Vladimir Putin. I wish we had an American president that, had the discipline and the, intellectual capacity and the integrity of a Vladimir Putin, and think about the general well-being of the people you're responsible for. I honestly believe when Vladimir Putin wakes up in the morning, his one driving force is, what can I do to make the life of the Russian people better? I believe it because you take a look at how he behaves and what he does. He acts on it. I don't think Donald Trump wakes up giving one rat's ass about the American people. He cares about Donald Trump. His administration right now is just bending over backwards to try and get him the Nobel Peace Prize. He's stopped 5 wars. You know that, right? He stopped all 5 of them, all 5 of the wars. And the 6th one, the big one, is Russia, and he's going to stop that too. And God, if the Russians ever say, all right, we'll do the ceasefire, if the Ukrainians do this, he's going to say, I've stopped all the wars in the world. I am the ultimate peacemaker. You must give me the Nobel Peace Prize. Forget the fact that I bombed Iran in violation of international law and that I worked with the Israelis to carry out a surprise attack against Iran. Forget that little fact. I mean, that's just, come on. 2 submarines moving to Russia? Not a big deal. He hasn't stopped any wars, not a single war. Every war he thinks he stopped is still festering. And if they stopped, it wasn't because of him. India and Pakistan didn't stop fighting because of Donald Trump. Cambodia and Thailand still are hooking and jabbing. The Cambodians might want to kiss his ass a little bit more and nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, but the Thais aren't, because the Thais know the truth. There's still problems there. He talked about he sent a 3-man delegation to the Congo to try and cook up a deal between Congo and Rwanda, and they had to flee for their lives. I mean, yeah, you stopped that war, didn't you, Donnie baby? He hasn't stopped a single war. And all he does is fuel wars. He sells weapons. The he's not just a hypocrite. He's not just a liar. He's ignorant, purely ignorant. And it's all narcissist based. This is all about Donald Trump. And my God, you have a president of the United States that is going to take all this power and just focus it on making Donald Trump seem like a great guy. $60 million worth of food to Gaza, but nobody's thanked me. Nobody's thanked me at all. Why aren't you thanking me? Why aren't you making sure the food gets to the people who need it? Well, somebody should thank me. This is where we're at right now. When was the last time Vladimir Putin had to go on national TV and beg people to thank him for something? Never.
Don't you think that Donald Trump is getting so much involved with the mindset of Europeans, and in terms of the new arms, sending new arms to Europe, and the way that they're trying to somehow invest in the US economy? I don't know if they're going to be capable of doing, but they're talking about it too much. Things are happening, considering whatever they're doing, European leaders are doing, considering the United States. They want something in Ukraine. They want the policy in Ukraine to be modified the way they want the US policy to be. And don't you think that would make some sort of barriers, obstacles for Donald Trump?
No. What can Europe do? Nothing. You saw Ursula von der Leyen when she met with him. So intimidated, she had to lie. She was so intimidated by the need to be seen as making a deal that she lied about $600 billion. There's no $600 billion. Donald Trump believed the lie. Apparently, he's running around talking about how I have $600 billion, no strings. I can do whatever I want with it. I build a golf course. There's no $600 billion. She had to go out immediately and say, yeah, no, there's no $750 billion either of energy. No. 3 years, $250 billion each. No. Europe's not buying $250 billion worth of energy from the United States. Last year, Europe bought $76 billion worth of energy from the United States, and that sort of maxed out their capacity to handle it. The United States only produced $310 billion worth of exportable energy last year, and that was going to everywhere but Europe. And now you're saying the United States is going to drop all those contracts, all the contracts in Asia and elsewhere, to divert it over to Europe. They can't handle it. Even if the United States was able to flow all the liquid natural gas into Europe, there's no place to receive it. You deliquefy it, to get it into the system, long-term storage. None of it exists. So it's a made-up number, fake. But that's what Donald Trump does. He lies about everything, just made-up numbers. So right now you have the Europeans just going out there and just making stuff up. But it's not real. It doesn't change anything. Ukraine's screwed 6 ways from Sunday. I mean, you can sit here. People, just stop believing anything that comes out of Europe. Stop. It's all a lie. They even, this whole, what do they call it? Pearl, P-E-R-L or P-U-R-L or something. I don't know, this new Department of Defense thing. Basically, it's the scam of scam of scams. Hey, Europe, you already bought something from us? Give it to Ukrainians and then buy the replacement from us. So you're paying for the same thing twice. That's what it is. I mean, that's the scam. Nima, you just bought a car. Okay, I want you to give the car away to your uncle and go out and buy a new car. You pay. Your uncle wants a car. Give him your car. Go out and buy a new car. You pay. And that new car is going to be on standby in case your uncle wants it again. Is this a good deal for you, Nima? But that's the deal that we gave all of Europe. That's it. And the Europeans went, oh yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Europe's got nothing. There's got in order for Europe to have something, they have to have leverage over us. They have to be able to pick up the phone and say, we need you to do something right now, Uncle Sam. That's not how this works. Daddy talks, the little babies listen. That's it. That's the relationship. Daddy, baby, daddy, baby. And I hate to say that, except Mark Rutte thinks that Donald Trump is NATO's daddy. And Donald Trump's more than happy to, I think he even printed up a t-shirt. It says daddy and got his picture on it. This is where we're at. So there's just no obstacles coming out of Europe. Europe's got nothing. Nothing. It's embarrassing. You saw the humiliation of Keir Starmer and his wife coming to the castle, going to the king, the American king. This is just stupidity in the extreme. Paul, I wish there was something more intellectually sound that I could say about this, but what do you say about people debasing themselves? The Europeans are nothing. They've got nothing. Tell me one thing the Europeans have. One, just name it. Say, yep, Europe can deliver the following. Nothing.
Yeah. I would argue the only thing that they have is the hatred toward Russia, and nobody knows the reason of that.
They don't even have that, though. You can't say Europeans. That's the European. 16% of the Germans would fight for their country today. 16%. Tell you what, if America ever gets to the point where 16% say, yeah, we'll fight for our country, it's time to wrap it up, cash it in. I mean, if you're a male of fighting age and you call yourself an American, doesn't mean you have to join the military right now. But if somebody invades your country, you have to be ready to go to war right now, drop everything and go to war and give your life. That's what being an American is all about. That's what being a citizen of anything. I would imagine, you live in Brazil. Are you a Brazilian? I mean, I don't mean to get personal here, but do you have Brazilian citizenship?
Yeah. Yeah,
All
I
right.
have.
So if Brazil was invaded, Argentina comes across the border. They're coming in, and they say every man capable of holding a weapon has to come to the defense of Brazil. I think you'd find a way to do it, because that's what you do in the country you live in that they call yours. The Germans, you have Merz pretending he's the Fourth Reich. 16% of the Germans say, yeah, we'll fight for this. And I bet you that's a high percentage throughout Europe. I've had this conversation with people before. The European Union destroyed Europe in so many ways. But one of the main ways they destroyed Europe is that Europe stopped being real, because the European Union's fake. There's no such thing as European citizenship or a European identity. There's not. But what they did is they created this fake identity, and people forgot who they were. They forgot that they were French. They forgot that they were German. Thank God the Italians got Maloney, so the Italians at least know that they're Italians. But that's probably more due to the mafia than anything else. At least the mafia is proud of being Italian. But all these nations, the Portuguese, they just run all over Europe trying to get jobs. They're not going to fight and die for Portugal. In Spain, you got the Catalonians will fight and die for Catalonia, but Spanish people going to fight, and nobody's going to die for Europe. Nobody's going to die for Europe. I mean, so this is just stupid. But in Russia, Russian men are volunteering to go to the special military operation to get this thing done. They're volunteering by the tens of thousands every month. And if you invade Russia, as Germany and NATO are saying they might have to do, it's all over. Every man comes out of the woodwork, and that's it. You have to kill every Russian, and you're not going to kill every Russian. History has shown that when you piss the Russians off, they end up taking your capital city. Ask the French, ask the Germans.
Scott, you mentioned Brazil, and we know that India is right now, Donald Trump applied secondary tariffs in India, and they're doing the same to Brazil. If you want to make BRICS weaker, what would you do? Do you go fight all of them together, or you go fight one by one? Because the way that Donald Trump, we have to understand the mindset in Washington, because we have to be honest with ourselves. Is there any rational process of thinking in Washington? Because when you attack Brazil doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the Middle East, in Ukraine, nothing. They try to negotiate, they try to talk with the United States. But after all, you don't see that sort of mindset in Washington to understand that.
I would look. Trump had BRICS on the ropes. Just take a look at the last BRICS summit. It was held in Brazil. Lula wasn't able to advance very aggressive policies because there was domestic pushback. Saying, no, India's sitting there having a tussle with China, and India's on the ropes. Do we want, we're not really all in on this thing anymore. So if I were Donald Trump, I would have went, all right, I need to incentivize Brazil and India. I mean, we have $1 trillion defense budget. I would have declared a national emergency. And I would have gone to India, and I said, what are you paying for Russian oil? How much Russian oil are you buying? All right, I'm going to work it. You're going to get all the oil you need at the price you need. I'm going to sell you subsidized American oil. We're going to get other people to sell you subsidized oil. We're going to meet the Russian price, but you don't buy Russian oil anymore. You buy from us. What can the Russians do at that point in time? You didn't sanction them. You just did better business. Now the Russians come in and go, well, we're going to cut our price even more. Well, isn't that what Trump just said he wanted? I want a $10 drop. Isn't that the cap that the Europeans said they wanted? We want to put a cap on how much money the Russians make off of oil. Instead of spending billions on weaponry that gets thrown out, you want to starve the Russians out. You're not going to do it with China, but with India, who went from buying what 3 to 4% of their oil came from Russia a couple of years ago to 40% this last year. No, just subsidize alternative oil, subsidize it, make it competitive. It costs us money, but I thought the goal was to break the Russians. That's how I would have broken the Russians. I would have just said, yep, they need the oil. Let's make it impossible. And doing the secondary sanctioning, now you've threatened the sovereignty of India. And India can't go for that. They can't. There's no way they can do that. If I wanted the Indians to break away from Russia, rather than saying, you can't buy the S-400, I'd just say, your next purchase will be THAAD, right? Because we're going to offer to you great terms. We'll give it to you. We'll give you a THAAD. You want the best F-35? You want the F-35? You got it. Heavily subsidized. We're just going to throw them at you. And basically, you take the arms market away from the Russians. You take the oil market away from the Russians. Not by threatening anybody, just by going in there and outbidding them. It costs money. It's an investment. But what are we doing now? We're sanctioned. We end up paying those sanctions, the American taxpayer. We don't accomplish the mission. We end up isolating ourselves. We make ourselves irrelevant. It's not a sustainable business model. I mean, we can't do it forever, but how many years do you have to strangle the Russian oil, the oil export market before the Russian economy blinks? That's the question you have to ask. But Trump is incapable of doing that. I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed of success, but there's a hell of a lot better chance of success. And the other thing you do there is now you create a problem because India now starts buying American oil or, oil not, and that BRICS relationship starts to get strained, starts to get frayed. And now you can start pulling India away and you incentivize India to stay with the G20. And maybe one of the things you talk to the Indians about is, hey, how does G8 sound? That 8 used to belong to Russia. But what if we went G8 and that's you, big boy, Modi, Mr. G8? How's that look? If you want to break BRICS, you don't attack them all and force them to come together, which is what Trump is doing. You find the weak link, India, and you do whatever you need to bring the Indians out of BRICS. And when you do that, it starts to collapse. It's no longer, you take the Indian economy from BRICS, it's a huge hit. BRICS keeps bragging, justifiably so, about, the fact that their total GDP is more percentage than theirs. But remove India from that argument no longer flies. I mean, you got China. China's, a big deal. But if BRICS is just seen as a Chinese play toy, that's not as attractive at this point in time as, this multipolar entity. India brings, an attractiveness in terms of other nations saying, yeah, we want to be part of that. That's why you see Thailand, applying. You see Malaysia applying, Indonesia becoming a member. This is because of India, because of Indian membership. And so all Donald Trump's doing right now is guaranteeing that India now, when they look to where to go for help, it's going to be BRICS. They just made India a steadfast member of BRICS. I personally am happy. There's going to be a lot of people that are, shut up, Scott. Don't tell Trump how to do he's not going to do it, guys. So don't worry about it. But I think it's time for, a multipolar reality check. But I'm just saying that, if I were advising the president and was told, we want to achieve something, what the president's policy is achieving the exact opposite of what he wants to achieve. And what he's going to do is make America not the indispensable nation, but the irrelevant nation.
But the solution that you mentioned, that would take time. It doesn't be overnight because we know that the identity of these oils are somehow different. The process of refineries, and it's all different that they have to consider. We've learned that from the case of China. They were trying to replace Iranian oil with something else. but it takes time. It takes a lot of time to replace all of these facilities there and modify them and doing this and that. And for the case of
I agree with you. I agree with you. But, you know, there are innovative ways around this. For instance, we know that when we stopped, buying Venezuelan oil, our refineries in the Gulf Coast were heavily dependent. They were configured for Venezuelan oil, specific kind of crude. And it would cost a lot of money to change, as you mentioned, to switch over and modify to a different kind of crude. And once you do that, you have to make sure then that you continue to access that crude over time. We ended up turning to, I think it was the Russians for the Ural grade fuel, that because it had similar chemical characteristics, so that the refineries didn't have to be modified. And we were buying a lot of Russian crude to operate in our refineries. I'm not going to pretend that it would be easy. I'm just saying that there's, it might involve me covertly buying Venezuelan crude to replace the Russian oil. What I do is I find sources around the world that, have crude that can replicate the specific, chemical characteristics of the Russian crude, so that the Indian refineries don't have to undergo these things. Because what is my goal here? My goal is to bankrupt Russia and deny them, oil sales. And so if that's your goal, then get clever about it. But we're not clever. And, that then we'd say, well, we can't buy Venezuelan crude because we're trying to strangle them to death too. Well, that just means that you become irrelevant, because when you try to strangle everybody to death, you strangle nobody but yourself.
But if I were Indian, I would say that, so if we do all these modifications to receive the US oil, how about the future? Can we rely on the decisions that come in the next 4 years?
That's where being a lion sack of manure.
If the United States is willing to sanction us because of Ukraine, look at this. Yeah. Because of Ukraine, they're putting sanction on us, which we know that the importance of India economically, not just for the United States, for Russia, China, for the world. And you put you somehow putting pressure on India because of Ukraine.
You're right. I mean, look, what I'm saying is, on paper, there's a solution to everything if you're innovative enough. But once you get India to make fundamental changes, they have to be sustainable changes. And a lot of that depends on India trusting the United States to be a stable partner. I mean, the United States already has a problem where we've allowed ideology to infiltrate foreign policy to the extent now that every president ends up, getting us a knee jerk all over the place. Trump's only around for 3 more years. And then what? So the Indians are, let's say Trump made me the negotiator. I went there and I found all the solutions, and I'm sitting there with the Indians. All right, this is what we're going to do. Boom, 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 boom. And they're going to look at me and go, Scott, we think you're an honest guy. And this is a really, really interesting thing you've put forward here. But you work for Donald Trump, and he disappears in 3 years. And what guarantees can you give me that the person that replaces Donald Trump is going to think this is a good idea? And you can't give a guarantee. Well, I think J.D. Vance is going to be, I can't guarantee that. Can't guarantee anything in the American. And so the Indians are like, no, even though what you said sounds good, no. We're going with long-term stability. We're going with people we trust. But because everything you're doing, Scott, is going to be based upon an executive order, because you're not turning it into a treaty with Congress. And even if you did turn it into a treaty with Senate ratification, we see how the United States treats treaties. You just throw them away, and they're inconvenient, and then we'll become inconvenient again. So you're 100% correct. I mean, my slick little brain could probably come up with a solution that works on paper, but translating that into diplomatic reality is impossible, because nobody trusts us, And even if they trust this, if they, for some reason, decide to trust this administration, what happens if the Democrats regain control of the White House? They're going to dismantle everything Trump has done. Try to fix it, get it back to the way it was. Who in the world wants to deal with that? I mean, they already have to deal with this feckle and feckless, America that just shifts all over the place. But you're 100% right. This is why America has become, instead of the, indispensable nation, we become the, irrelevant nation, because we don't matter. Not in the long term. There's no stability with us. We can't get a treaty in place because Congress is split and politicized, and no Democrat will ever vote for a treaty that's good for a Republican president. So the president will do everything based upon an executive order, which is immediately reversible the moment a new president comes in. You're right. I apologize for even injecting the possibility of America coming up with something clever. We can't, because we're the worst people in the world to deal with. We stand for nothing. We are nothing. And nobody should ever trust us.
Scott, do you feel that the Congress is somehow, do we know about their position in Ukraine, with all that said, with the realities of what's going on in Ukraine? Do you understand if they're going to be, I don't know if Donald Trump decides, let's assume that Donald Trump, after this round of talks between the two parties, the United States and Russia, would decide about doing something different. And is he going to get support from the Congress?
No. Congress exists to get votes. That's it. And if they're doing something that can get them votes, they'll support it. If they're doing something that doesn't get them votes, they won't support it. It's not about doing the right thing. It's purely about getting reelected. I wrote an article about this a little while ago on my Substack, about the role of the Ukrainian diaspora in formulating the foreign policy priorities of the United States vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. And I walk through the development, the 4 phases of immigration that led to the diaspora being what it is, and how in the early 1980s, the Banderist faction took over and is calling the shots, and that they've infiltrated the ranks of the United States government almost as effectively as the Israelis have. And this is how you get votes, because they make allies. It's just like AIPAC makes allies with, Christian Zionists and others. And then, the Ukrainians will make allies. So you vote for me, I'll vote for you. You create this pact of, aggression against everything. It's against what they view Ukrainian interests are, Israeli interests are. And the American politicians are a prisoner of that. The Russians do not have the equivalent. The Russians come in with sound logical argument, like, let's avoid a World War III. Russians have great culture, but to show you how powerful the Ukrainian lobby is, they can get people to, they can compel people to go out and voluntarily pour out Russian-made vodka, worth millions of dollars. They can change the name of a drink. The Moscow Mule becomes the Kiev Kick, or whatever the hell they want to call it. They can claim to own borscht, and they can shut down Russian restaurants. They can do all this. They can claim that Russian artists are Ukrainian artists. They just did that with the famous seascape painter. They actually destroyed his bust the other day. Where's the Russians don't have a political base. They don't have a Russian diaspora working with the United States Congress to create this political power base, this power system that can get people elected. And so, given that, Congress is not going to act on doing the right thing, because the only right thing in Congress is getting votes. And right now, the Ukrainians have the leverage on the vote generating mechanisms. They've co-opted American patriotic organizations, American religious organizations. so that, everybody's got a little Ukrainian flag on their social media account, and they think Slava Ukraine is a good thing to say. And as soon as you say, hey, like Vladimir Putin is the smartest, most prepared world leader in the world today, you're just a Putin's puppet. They got their little bot farm to attack you. So no, Congress, if you're waiting for Congress to do the right thing, you're going to wait forever.
So that would be hugely problematic, because if they don't get it to the Congress to sign it, any sort of settlement, any sort of agreement, I think Iran had the same issue. We remember JCPOA.
Yeah.
And that would come to the Russian mind. What does that mean, the sign of the United States president when he's gone?
Well, that's why I don't think we're going to be talking about a treaty between Russia and the United States. It'll be a treaty between Russia and Ukraine. This is why the Russians are so keen to get Zelensky out and get in somebody who's constitutionally legitimate. But it's Ukraine and Russia that have to sign this treaty, not the United States, and not Europe, because you can't trust Europe either. All the Russians need is for Ukraine to say we will never join NATO and commit to that in a binding treaty. They don't need NATO to say we'll never invite Ukraine, because that can change. And a president's word, if it's not backed up by a treaty, can be altered the next president that comes in. I gave my promise not to do this. Well, I'm not you. I'm now the president, so I'm going to, do X, Y, and Z. Even though the former president said he wasn't going to do X, Y, and Z, I am, because I'm the president, and there's nothing to stop me. No binding treaty obligations. And if there were, we'd simply go to Congress and say, we're pulling out of the treaty. So, yeah, the state of play of domestic American politics is such that it's created foreign policy and national security paralysis, because we're dealing with a president that's only going to be around for 3 more years, and everything he's doing is reversible under executive order. I mean, the same way he reversed Biden, he'll get reversed, and then we just find ourselves being whiplashed all over the place.
Do you feel the way that Donald Trump has been managing this situation so far, the Republican Party or the people who are close to Donald Trump and his sort of mindset would have the opportunity to win again? They're talking about J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has simply disappeared from the scene. Nobody knows what's going on. We know that he has his limitations. He's not that much powerful within the Constitution of the United States. It all depends on the President of the United States to give him some sort of power. But nobody sees that coming from Donald Trump. And how is that going to influence?
First of all, I think one of the reasons why J.D. Vance is laying low right now is because of the Epstein controversy. And he doesn't want, and I don't think Trump wants it to spill over on him. And so you keep the vice president out of these things. Although I guess there's a meeting right now, with J.D. Vance about releasing the transcripts or the recordings of the most recent meeting between the federal deputy attorney general of the United States and, Ghislaine Maxwell. So who knows? But yeah, J.D. Vance was always going to fight an uphill battle, trying to become relevant, under Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a narcissist. He's the only one that counts. Donald Trump doesn't share power. Donald Trump doesn't delegate. And so, Vance will be given an opportunity here, an opportunity there to shine. But, look at Vance went to Munich and spoke to the Munich Security Council, and you have people, security conference, and you have people saying that, what a speech. That's one of the greatest speeches made in that conference since Vladimir Putin, took down the house in 2007. Normally a president would say, my vice president went out there and kicked ass and I'm very good. Trump's like, you're not allowed to shine brighter than this star. So we're going to bring you back here and we're going to snuff out the light. You don't get to go out and play anymore. And that's, one of J.D. Vance's problems is that, he is a tool, but the doesn't want to give the tool credit for anything. So we'll see. I mean, the only good news from the Trump perspective is that the Democrats are so god awful that they, even in an environment where they should be thriving and gaining votes, votes and having their voice heard, they're still losing popularity because they're just that bad. They're so bad that they're losing popularity at a greater rate than Donald Trump, who's very bad.
I don't know if you watched the interview that former Israeli intelligence had with the Russian TV. He was talking about the links between the presidents of the United States and Epstein, and the case is similar to Epstein. And here is what he said. His name is Eri Ben-Menashe, and he's former Israeli intelligence.
Epstein's lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, came on this show, the emeritus professor of law at Harvard, and said, no, Trump's behavior as regards Gaza, as regards bombing Iran, as regards bombing Yemen, all his behavior can't be explained by any blackmail tapes of Trump. Do you believe in any way that the genocide in Gaza is being prolonged by the late Jeffrey Epstein?
I certainly believe that the Israelis are making sure that the Americans do not stop them from the killing in Gaza. I believe that the American government is sort of trapped by the Israelis. Jeffrey Epstein is one of their tools to trap them.
And what do you think of Dershowitz's denial?
Hold on a second. I want to give you an example. Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak met Arafat in the 90s, and there was no deal. The reason was Epstein. They were being blackmailed by Epstein. Ehud Barak was also a friend of Epstein, the prime minister of Israel at the time. But he was being blackmailed by the Israeli right wing as well. And they stopped an agreement with Arafat. They were about to reach an agreement there for a two-state solution, but that was stopped because of Epstein. They were both being blackmailed by Epstein.
Scott, it's somehow amazing that the way that he's describing the situation, based on what he said, there is a far-right faction in Israel that controls everything. All these spies, all these tools in the United States and in Israel against anybody in Israel and in the United States. And they trying to manipulate and somehow control the situation in favor of their line of mindset, their line of rhetoric.
I mean, this is, long been a subject of speculation. The thing about Ben Menashe is he has no firsthand experience in this. So he's relaying, he's as qualified as you and I am on this topic. He's relaying what he believes is happening with other people. He didn't run this operation. He didn't, he didn't direct this. He doesn't know if there's a product from these operations. What I'd really love Ben Menashe to say is, so there I was in the Kyria, with our meeting, and and I said, how's the Epstein operation going along? Who did we get this day? That George W. Bush is causing us some problems on settlements. Did anybody get him to diddle a 14-year-old girl? We got that on tape here. Good. Make the phone call. No, he can't say that. So I don't know where to go with his claim. I don't know where to go with anybody's claim on this until I get somebody that says, yep, I was in the room when we weaponized, operationalized Epstein material. I was in the room when, Operation, Pawn Breaker was discussed, and Palm Breaker was the Epstein operation, and Epstein went by the code name, the pink dildo and all that. I mean, whatever. I know that there's operations I can talk about where I can say, yep, I was here on this date. These are the people. This is the name of the operation. These are the names of the agents involved and all that kind of stuff. And when I talk about that, nobody can contradict me because I was there. I know what I'm talking about. But if I'm not there and I'm relying on other people to talk about it, then it just becomes speculation. Like, well, it's just very strange that the Americans sort of do the Israeli bidding all the time. Therefore, it makes sense that, Epstein will control them. That's the problem with this whole Epstein thing, is that there's just so much speculation put out there. It makes sense, some of it, but I can't go running with what anybody says when they weren't in the room of the briefing when the undisputed facts were put on the table. In my heart, I believe Epstein's operation was an Israeli Mossad operation. I believe that they were, using the perversions of wealthy Americans to corrupt them and to co-opt them and to direct them. I believe this, but I can't say that it's fact. I can't say it's real. I can't say I know this to be true because I don't.
How do you understand Donald Trump's behavior when it comes to Israel? Do we know what has happened during the last meeting between Netanyahu and Donald Trump? Why there is no? Did you find any sort of outcome out of that meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu? Nobody's talking about it. What was the main goal of that meeting? It was Iran, it was Epstein, it was the case of Gaza. And in Israel, they don't talk about it. In the United States, they didn't talk about it. Nobody knows what has happened. What's going on and how much? Because whenever we talk about Netanyahu, it seems that he is somehow weakening, considering what's going on in Israel. But Donald Trump is coming out and supporting him even stronger. If he's weakening in Israel, why Donald Trump cannot somehow get benefit of that and do whatever he wants to do? But it seems that as time goes by and everything goes against Netanyahu in Israel, Donald Trump's position is getting stronger toward supporting Netanyahu.
First of all, Netanyahu has been around for a long time. And so when you're looking for predictable outcomes, even if you disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu, he provides consistency over time that allows for more predictable outcomes, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to get rid of him, but who's going to replace them and how do we know that the outcome will be different? So I think one of the things that Netanyahu has got going for him is that he's just been in this job forever and that he knows everybody. He knows Washington, D.C., and he knows the Washington, D.C. deep state better than Donald Trump does. And I think he has same levels of connectivity throughout Europe and the world. So Benjamin Netanyahu is a known knowable. And from Donald Trump's perspective, that's a good thing. I also think that Donald Trump is, at the end of the day, a moral and intellectual coward. That he doesn't stand for anything. And if you stand for nothing except yourself, then you pick the path of least resistance to get votes and money necessary to run for office. There's an old saying, and I had a general tell me this once when I was arguing my case. He said, when you're explaining, you're losing. So if Donald Trump was a man of character, and intelligence, he would feel that he had an obligation to explain to the American people why the continued Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory is morally wrong and why the United States has a moral imperative to change the outcome. You don't get elected that way. When you're explaining, you're losing. If you start explaining something, all people hear is but. But then somebody slides in and says, no, I am with Israel, 100% behind Israel. Israel is the power of good. Israel is this. And the people with the short attention spans go, We're comfortable with that. That makes us feel comfortable, because now you want us, after being told for how many years now that we're supposed to support Israel, you want us to come out and dump Israel and support people that you were calling terrorists, and they blow things up and they kill. And what about October 7th? You see, because the non-intellectual thinker is going to buy into the notion. They still believe that there's, babies in ovens and beheaded. Anyway, they're still using that argument. There's still people out there making the argument about, babies in the ovens, the beheaded, the mass rapes, the whole thing. They slaughtered those people, at the festival. No, the Israelis killed over half of them. Trump is just the man who took the easiest path. And right now, supporting Israel in this country is the easiest path. It's the easiest path. It's not the right path, but it takes a man of character, a man of courage to do the right thing. Donald Trump is not a man of character. He's not a man of courage. So he's going to take the path of least resistance. And that's the mastery of AIPAC and the whole pro-Israeli lobby, is that they have made life easier for those who support the cause of Israel, and they make life harder for those who go against it. And Donald Trump is a man that believes in taking the easy path. Look at tariffs. There's no master stroke here. He's just throwing out random numbers and then changing them and going on. Not because if he truly believed in something, he could articulate the stance he believed in. He could go out there, defend it. He could withstand the opposition. But he just tells lies. I'm gonna generate enough tariff-based income to make sure that Americans who earn less than $200,000 a year don't ever have to pay income tax again. And everybody goes, really? Oh, that's it. I get back to that. Don't pay taxes again. Not anything about Israel, Gaza, and all that. We don't have to pay taxes again. This is the code that Donald Trump has broken, as he plays to the lowest common denominator. And he can shift as the days on, because the political memory of these people is zero. He just has to keep saying the right words. He'll refine his message, his lies. That's where we're at. I mean, it's not that the Israeli lobby controls Donald Trump. I don't believe they do. I believe that Donald Trump is such a weak man that he takes the path of least resistance, and the Israeli lobby provides the path of least resistance. It's so much easier to explain. Look, put yourself in President Trump's shoes, okay? First of all, he's an idiot. Straight up idiot. Doesn't know anything about anything. And now you're dealing with Iran. For, 25 years now, the American people have been told the Iranians are trying to build a nuclear weapon, that the Iranians are bad. And how do we reinforce the idea that the Iranians are bad? We pull out the old black and white photographs of the mullahs poking the dead bodies, the charred bodies of the 8 service members who lost their lives in Desert One. Why are we in Desert One? And we pull up the video of the students going over the wall and taking American hostages for over 400 days. So the average American is just, all I have to do is play a couple movies. Maybe I can get Ben Affleck to make a movie about rescue. Oh, he did that already. And people watch that and they just are inherently afraid. Maybe I can get Sally Fields to do a movie about them kidnapping. It's been done. You see, we make all sorts of movies that make the Iranians look like the worst people in the world. And so the American public is preconditioned into believing anything negative about Iran. And now, so we accept at face value the notion that the Iranians are trying to illegally acquire technology to produce a nuclear weapon. And it's been, political generation after political generation after political generation buying into this. And now you have President Trump, and you want him to stand up and tell the truth to the American people? Then he has to explain. The Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon. Mr. President, yeah, what about that 60% enriched uranium? Well, that's not really weapons grade. Mr. President, but do they have any use for that 60% enriched uranium? No, there is no viable use. I believe they're used as leverage against this negotiating table. Mr. President, why would they want to do leverage unless they really wanted a nuclear weapon? Mr. President, they stopped counting centrifuges 2 years ago. Do we know where all the centrifuges are? Mr. President, if we don't know where all the centrifuges are, if you're explaining, you're losing. There's an answer for this. You have to, if you know your stuff, you can negotiate. But do the people want to listen? Do they want to hear? Do they want this data? I do. You do. A handful of people out there, the facts are important. But for the average American who gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes home at night, drinks a beer, watches TV, goes to bed, repeat, rinse all over again, they don't want to sit there and listen to Scott Ritter spout out technological and technical mumbo jumbo, because all they have to do. I found this out when I was having done weapons inspection in Iraq for 7 years. I resigned on principle, making the case that the U.S. was selling a false case for war. I would go on TV, Fox, CNN. And I remember one time I went on, and it was supposed to be a debate. And they brought, his name slips me, but he was the Republican co-chair of, the Republican National Committee. I'm like, can he even spell Iraq? Does he know anything about weapons? When I checked the names of all the inspectors that ever went to Iraq, his name's not on there. When I checked the names of all the soldiers that ever fought, his name's not on there. But now he is going to debate me about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so I can get up there and spout the Bible. I got it all. I did it all. I lived it. I got everything. Boom. And he just got, Saddam Hussein is an evil man who gassed the Kurds, and he can't be trusted, and he's got weapons of mass destruction, and he's taking them to Syria. And the audience is going, yeah, you got him, baby. Ritter, pound sand. They're taking the weapons to Syria. Saddam Hussein gassed his own people. You lose. I didn't lose. Well, I did. I didn't lose factually. I lost the PR game. This is the way it is. Donald Trump and the people around him aren't going to sit there and trying to explain to the American people why Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, because the American people aren't programmed to accept that argument. I know. I went before the American people and articulated till my face was blue that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Every word I said was proven true because it was the truth. I lived it for 7 years, but didn't matter. All Rush Limbaugh had to come out and go, Scott Ritter, he drank that Kool-Aid, baby. Oh, yeah, Scott Ritter drank the Kool-Aid. Nope, Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction. And all the, Rush Limbaugh fans out there went, yep, Iraq's got weapons of mass destruction because Rush Limbaugh told me. Well, that's how it is with Iran. And, Mark Levine, all Mark Levine has to do is count. Them Iranians are building a nuclear weapon. There it is. It came from Mark Levine. It's got to be true. Doesn't matter that, we can get people out there and say, nope, this is da, 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 da. Donald Trump's not in the business of explaining to the American people. He's in the business of taking the path of least resistance to achieve an outcome that's most favorable for the promotion of Donald Trump. He doesn't want to go down in history as the man who facilitated an Iranian uranium enrichment program that the American people have been told for 25 years represents an existential threat to the United States and the world. That's not Donald Trump's job. He wants to go down in history as the man who solved the problem that nobody else could solve for 25 years. The Iranian nuclear program, by eliminating it, not by saying, yeah, let's let it live and prosper and do whatever it wants to do because they're allowed to do it under Article 4 of the NPT. Donald Trump doesn't even know what Article 4 of the NPT is. That's where we're at right now. And it's a shame that the United States has come to this, where we're literally being led by a moron who's surrounded by lesser morons, none of them who know anything about anything. These are just yes men and women, with some exceptions, who tell the president what he wants to hear so that the president feels better about himself. This has nothing to do with the legitimate national security interests of America, promoting America's economic benefit, making the world a safer place to live in. It has everything to do with making sure that Donald Trump can be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Do you know who's the new chief of Iranian Security Council, National Security Council? He's Ali Larijani. We talk about him before all this happening. He said, if they attack us, there is no option for us but to build nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs. And he's the head of national security right now. And Iran has created a new council. It's called Supreme Defense Council.
Defense Council, yeah.
They're getting prepared, Scott. I talk with them. I talk with Marandi. I talk with people there. There is no option in their mind. They feel that Israel would attack them. The United States would help Israel, and they're getting prepared for everything.
I wrote
And
I wrote an article. It's on my computer, 98% done. And I was in the process of finishing up, and I was going to publish it. It was I mean, I hope you realize that I do know. I've studied the Iranian nuclear program for a long time. I'm not claiming to be the world's best expert on it. I'm sure there's other people out there better on this than me, but I think I've got a good grasp of it. And I was getting ready to make the argument that even after all of this bombing, after all of this, that Iran shouldn't be viewed as a nuclear threat, that, a case can be made that we can get Iran back to where the world should want them, which is a non-nuclear weapon state. And then I reread it, and I let it sit, and I reread it again. I don't believe that argument anymore. I mean, it's an argument I want to believe, but as an analyst and taking a look at the things, because they've been leaning in this direction for some time now. I made a statement before the bombing that Iran was a nuclear threshold state, and I believe that statement. And I made a statement that said that if the political decision had been made, Iran was weeks away from possessing a usable nuclear weapon. Either Iran possesses a usable nuclear weapon now, several of them, or they have advanced this even further to where they have everything, they just have to assemble the weapon. I believe they're beyond the enrichment aspect of it. I don't think Iran's shuttling around 60% enriched uranium, waiting, for the IAEA to come back in and confirm it. And the Iranians can get away with a whole bunch of things. For instance, they can say, IAEA, where's the 60% enriched uranium? You blew it up. It's underneath Ferdo, baby. Bring in the excavators. You dig it out. But they're not even going to do that. The Iranians, the way I knew that the Iranians have made this step is the way they're treating the IAEA. There will be no more inspections. There could be visits that will be guided to where Iran wants them to go, and Iran will take them to safeguarded facilities. But all the things we're talking about aren't safeguarded facilities because they're not going to be declared. And Iran will never declare them again to the IAEA because the IAEA turns that around. And I think Iran has made the decision that they can only exist as a nuclear weapon state. And when the time comes, Iran will make that known. But I think in order for that time to come, they need some serious upgrades to their air defense and their air capabilities. And I believe they're getting that right now from the Russians and the Chinese. I hope I'm wrong. This is why I haven't even written it. I mean, talking to you is a risk because, as you know, on the internet, nothing ever goes away. And so this conversation, which is an honest conversation, a heartfelt conversation, may come back and bite me in the ass because they're going to say, you said this, that, and the other thing. What I'm saying is I can no longer say in good faith that I don't believe Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. The Iranians can prove me wrong, and I'm not condemning the Iranians. I'm on board with saying it is what it is, but it's a very risky thing right now. It's a very risky thing. And this is why this conversation is dangerous, because Trump is a madman, a literal madman. And, if the Iranians declare a nuclear weapon, it's not ready to be used instantaneously and guaranteed outcomes, Trump will nuke them. But if the Iranians are able to say, Trump can nuke the whole country and we're still taking out Israel, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. That's deterrence. I didn't want it to get to this point. I didn't believe the Iranians would be able to make that transition without being detected, because I know what the IAEA is capable of doing. But we're in a unique situation, right? There hasn't been an IAEA inspector in Iran since the war started. And the Iranians aren't sitting on their thumbs. There's silence about what's going on. In fact, you may have seen this. At first I thought it was AI, But there was a member of parliament who's also a member of the security establishment who said Iran has a nuclear weapons program now. I mean, they've just come right out and said it. I'm like, well, that's not really the vector I want to hear it from. But you're not going to hear it from the supreme leader in order for this to happen, Iran has to present the world with a fait accompli and say, we have a nuclear weapons capability that can destroy all of Israel and you can't interdict it. And if you try, we kill all of Israel. Israel disappears. That's the reality we're at right now. I fought this. I don't like this. I don't think it adds, but I think we've given the Iranians no choice. When we launched a strike that didn't just target their nuclear facilities, but sought to decapitate them, regime change. What choice does the regime have right now? You can't go back to the status quo. You can't go back to allowing inspectors to run around inside Iran, knowing that those inspectors in the past, having seen what they saw, turned it into targets for the Israelis. The Israelis will just bomb again if the United States won't allow what international law allows. But this is also dangerous because from a non-proliferation standpoint, this could very well lead to the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region. That's another reason why I'm not happy about this. But I don't think the Iranians have a choice right now. They don't have a choice because before this, when we were talking about the theoretical possibility of a war. But now we know what the war looks like. We know what it is. Israeli bombing, Iranian missiles. We know it. We saw it. It's no longer theory. It's there. We crossed that river. So it's no longer saying, well, it's really hard to conceive Israel and Iran fighting a war. No, it's not. They did it. And we know what it will look like. And it's going to happen again. That's the other thing is unless Iran does declare a functioning, viable, deliverable nuclear weapons capability, it will be bombed again by Israel and the United States. The only way to prevent that is a nuclear weapon. So there we are. I'm sorry I had this conversation with you. I think it's gonna be out there, and people are gonna say, "Oh, he changed his mind. He flip-flopped." I respect your show, but stick it in your ass, people that say that. The thing about a professional analyst, and that's what I am.
Everything's fluid, Scott. Everything's fluid. The conditions change.
Well, if you're going to be married to a thought, you're not an analyst. You're an ideologue. Okay, an analyst sits there and evaluates the situation, the changing realities. And if you don't understand how many things have changed since Israel first attacked Iran on June 12th to where we are today, if you don't understand what's changed there, then you shouldn't be involved in this conversation or this dialogue. Everything has changed. Everything. Every red line that we thought couldn't be crossed was crossed. And the whole region is different now. We talked a lot about, and Professor Morandi, Iran can do a lot of damage to Israel. We all talked about that, but that was all hypothetical. Well, now we know it's real. We know that Iran is capable of doing a lot of damage to Israel. We know that air defense or missile defense systems don't work. We know that Iran is a hell of a lot more vulnerable to Israeli action than anybody thought they would be. We know a whole bunch of things that now, allows us to put, in the past when we were trying to basically take one of those 1,000 piece puzzles and tell what it was with 15 pieces, all right, Nima, there's 15 pieces. Tell me what I'm looking at. I don't know. I can speculate, but I don't know. It's only 15 pieces. Well, we poured about 500 pieces on the board, and those pieces are connecting together. And I think now we're able to say, it looks like we're looking at a mountain scene with a river and a field of flowers, and that's probably what we're looking at now. There's a whole bunch more pieces of the puzzle on the table right now. And I think things are becoming much clearer. It's not a picture I wanted to see. I'm not one of these cheerleaders out there. They were like, Iran needs the bomb. No, I don't want Iran to have the bomb. I believe in getting rid of nuclear weapons, not promoting it. If this can be done in a way that the spread of nuclear capability is limited to Iran, and maybe this is what triggers Israel working on a solution to get rid of their nuclear weapons in exchange for Iran and verifying a nuclear-free zone. Okay, that's one way to get rid of the Israeli bomb. I mean, I think everybody's in agreement Israel shouldn't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And it's a hell of a, the hypocrisy of saying, well, it's okay for Israel to have it, turn a blind eye, but oh my God, if the Iranians get it. The NPT no longer has any value. See, I was a big believer in the NPT. I was a big believer in international law. I was a big believer, and I still am, in the potential of it. But when the United States and Israel can get away with literal murder, with a Pearl Harbor event, with the lies, I mean, where's the shame? Telling the Iranians that we're going to have this negotiation and then allowing Israel to bomb them to try and kill the negotiating team along with the rest of, where's the shame? I mean, so the whole thing's changed. The nuclear non-proliferation treaty is out the window, along with everything else. I mean, look at the Russians. I'm not blaming the Russians, but, Oreshnik. It's real now. It's not just a theory. It's real. It's being deployed. Belarus is getting it. It's a dual-use capable system. That's different. The SS-20 we knew was nuclear. With the Oreshnik, well, it can be nuclear and it can be conventional. How the hell do you deal with that from a arms control standpoint? And it's not the only one. Dmitry Medvedev hinted what I've been saying all along. There's going to be another family, or at least one, probably two more intermediate range missiles being deployed that will give Russia, all the capacity it needs to deal with the threat that's emerging from the United States and NATO in terms of Dark Eagle and things of that nature. But to bring Belarus into the nuclear club the way that they have, I mean, look, the Russians are only doing what NATO did all along with Turkey, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany. Nobody talks about the French and the British nuclear capability outside of NATO because they are independent. So yes, Belarus is now a nuclear power in terms of having capability. It's destabilizing. It's stabilizing in a perverse way for Russia and Belarus because they needed to do it. You can't have Belarus out there hanging on by itself, where you got Poland and the Baltic states threatening it, by making sure that people know that if you attack Belarus, you trigger not just Belarus, but Russia, the Union State, and their dual nuclear, arsenals. That provides guarantees of security for Belarus, but it's destabilizing. It's very nuclear weapons are not the solution. They're the problem. But the problem is the behavior of the United States have now made them the solution. And it's frustrating. That's why I haven't written about Iran in a long time. I have literally 3 Iranian articles on my computer that I've written. One of them's finished. I almost sent it, but it was called The Inspection Trap. And I basically said that, the Iranians have fallen into the inspection trap by not allowing the inspectors back in. They've set themselves up the way the Iranians set themselves, the Syrians set them up, so now they're at the mercy of inspections. Well, the Iranian solution is just say, we don't care. And, we don't want them back, and we're not trying to get them back, and we're going to function without them. We no longer accept that scenario. What made inspections work with Saddam Hussein is that he wanted sanctions lifted. And the only way to get sanctions lifted was through an inspection-based outcome. The same thing with the Syrians. When it became clear to me the Iranians just didn't care about anything related to the inspectors, that part of their life was over and they're moving on to a new reality, then there's no trap. Maybe it's a reverse trap. But now the Iranians have set in motion events that will inevitably lead to a military strike unless they deter it with a declared nuclear weapons capability. And I think that's the next step that's going to happen here. We'll see. It's a very sad and frightening situation, but the world's changed. I mean, again, who predicted an Israeli surprise attack while the United States was negotiating? Where's the genius that said, I got that one. It's on my bingo card. Nobody predicted it.
No.
Nobody predicted. And when it happened, we all were doing the same thing. What? how could America do that? How could Donald Trump do that? And again, it comes back full circle. Steve Witkoff went to Russia.
Yeah.
You got to believe in the back of the Russians' mind, it's saying, we can't trust a word you're saying. You just sent 2 frickin' submarines closer to our shore armed with Trident nuclear armed missiles. And now you want us to listen to you as if that's all going to come up. We don't trust anything you say. That's why the Oreshnik is operational. The Oreshnik is alive. That's why Dmitry Medvedev did the unprecedented thing of talking about dead hand, even though he said maybe it doesn't exist. You don't have a former president of Russia who knows damn well that the dead hand exists mention the dead hand unless he's telling you we got the dead hand. So, Trump is just screwed the pooch. That's a fighter term. It's not a dirty term. It's fighter pilot term. But he's shooting himself down. I mean, he's shooting America down. And even when you have the few good people, I believe that Steve Witkoff's a good guy. I don't agree with him with everything. I know ideologically people are out there, but I think
he has no power, as you mentioned. He's a messenger. He is a messenger.
But I do believe that when he met with the Iranians, I believe he was sincere, and I believe the Iranians viewed him as sincere, which is half the tragedy here, because the Iranians, sadly, the Iranians went to bed on the night of June 12th, believing that they were going to have a meeting with Steve Witkoff and that there was a way out of this. I remember listening to, was it Salehi?
Salehi.
Yeah. Who everybody thought was dead, but then he magically turned up alive. Only after they dug his body out of the bone.
No, he was Shamkhani, if you're talking about.
Who?
Shamkhani.
Shamkhani. Yes, that's the guy. Shamkhani. Yeah. But he went to bed that night thinking, I mean, look, I've been in similar, not those high stakes, but I've been in situations where things are happening, meetings are coming up, and you're like hopeful that, wow, this could say things. And I remember going to bed, you're sort of fitful and you're like, okay, got to get a good night's sleep, because in the morning I'm going to get up and we're going to get to work on this. I really believe in this. I believe that Shamkhani went to bed that night in that mindset, saying, hey, Witkoff's coming in. I got a briefer coming in. We're going to do this. My God, this could be great. Went to bed, and next thing you know, boom, attacked, blown up. That destroyed Witkoff's reputation. Even though Witkoff wasn't involved in it, it destroyed. People want to say, ask yourself why Witkoff's been silent so long. How do you come out of that one? At least with Russia, he's got, the benefit for Witkoff is that he has Kirill Dmitriev as his counterpart, and Kirill Dmitriev still has a good reputation with Vladimir Putin and the inner circle, and so Witkoff can use Kirill Dmitriev as to come back. Kirill can vouch for Witkoff, but Witkoff can't vouch for Trump. That's the problem. I'm curious. We're talking. I'm sure as we're speaking, people are starting to. I would hope that the Kremlin's put out a readout. And maybe, I know Trump's supposed to speak at 4:30, and we're going to get some insight into this. But Witkoff was really hurt bad by the way Trump did him with the Iranian case.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
My pleasure. Again, my wife would probably tell me, you shouldn't go on these shows unless you want to keep it simple, stupid. But we're here having an honest dialogue. And if you're an analyst out there and you can't take a pause for the cause and re-examine the totality of the picture, and be honest about it, then you're not an analyst. It's one of the frustrating things about being an analyst is that the world changes. One week you get it all right. I mean, I nailed it. In the lead up to this, I nailed the problem the Iranians were creating for themselves about being a nuclear threshold state. Called it 100% correct. Today, I haven't the foggiest freaking clue what's going on, and I'll be honest enough to admit it that I have no idea what's going on. I'm not confident in anything anymore about Iran because none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. And that which does make sense, I don't want to believe. I mean, my brain is telling me one thing, my heart, I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that Iran is a nuclear weapons state. I don't want to believe it. But my brain's telling me that's probably the direction it's going. And it's tough. I mean, what I need to do is go to Iran, but they're not going to let me in Iran now. Not asking the questions I'm going to be asking. I think the Iranians liked me when I had it more simplified. But if I come in now going, I got some questions, guys, they'd be like, we prefer you don't come in and ask those questions at this time. Maybe later we'll bring you in, but not right now. So we'll see. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great pleasure as always, Scott. Yeah.